Merry Christmas. This is my plan is for this to be the last bisexual movie buff of the year, and given the time of the year, I thought what better than to talk about what is considered to be the ultimate Christmas classic. It's a Wonderful Life from 1946, directed by the great Frank Capra and starring the legendary James Stewart. You know, It's a Wonderful Life is, I believe, the earliest film I remember ever loving when I was a little kid about Christmas. The other was White Christmas, starring Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye. Well, I'm going to talk about this one. It's a Wonderful Life is just... It's pretty amazing for the time period it came out in, because a lot of movies are great from those periods, but usually they didn't feel like they really connected to real life so much. It is both a comedy and a drama, and it nails both genres perfectly. The movie can be heartbreaking, sad, and relatable, and it can also make you laugh, make you smirk, make you just have a good chuckle. And my family has backed me up on this, that I just watched this movie non-stop all the time at Christmas when I was a little kid, and I remember watching it all the time, and I stopped watching it as much as I used to somewhere around late elementary school or early middle school, and I watched it for the first time a few years ago, about 2011 I think, when I was going through a really tough time. And when I was thinking about what Christmas films to talk about for this year, on my first year as a online reviewer, figured, yes, this would be the perfect one to talk about. Now, before I ramble too much, and I know I do that a lot, about how fucking great this is, let me tell you the story. James Stewart plays a man named George Bailey who, ever since he was a little kid, has always dreamed of exploring the world. But circumstance and, I guess, unluckiness has just kept him from leaving his hometown of Bedford Falls. And the town of Bedford Falls is always just this far away from being run or taken over by this mean old banker named Mr. Potter, played by another legendary late actor, Lionel Barrymore. And the character of Mr. Potter is considered to be one of the greatest villains of all time by many people. The character is... He's not like the traditional movie villain. Mr. Potter, he runs the local bank in the town, and his goal is to have as much control over as many people and as many businesses in the town as possible, because the town is, aside from Mr. Potter, is very poor, and they really have nowhere else to go as far as getting money. And I don't know a ton about how the world of banking works, but I'm going to try my best to explain what happens in the movie. And George Bailey's father and uncle run a loans office, and it's through their office that some people in the town are able to make a good life and without having to go and surrender themselves to Mr. Potter. And George has no interest in carrying on in the family business. He wants to go out and see the world. But as the years go by in his life, as he gets older, things just keep happening. When he graduates high school, that's when George plans to finally leave. But his father sadly passes away. And the only way the company can stay afloat is if George takes his father's place, and at first he doesn't want to, but when he finds out that the character Mr. Potter will then take charge of everything, business, money related. He stays behind because he can't bear to see that happen. And as I said, the character Mr. Potter, he's just ruthless and he just wants everything in the town. He wants pretty much to be, I guess, the god of the town. And I'll get into why that's funny in a minute. And George is the only person who's been able to prevent that from happening. And Potter hates him for it, and he hates his family for it. And as the years go by, George just never gets to leave. Whenever it seems like someone else in the family could take over, that person ends up getting a better offer or chance to succeed somewhere. And while they get to do that, George just never gets to have his chance. But it doesn't mean he's completely without happiness. We see in early scenes that show him as a child that there's this little girl at the time, when he was a kid, named Mary Hatch, played by Donna Reed. And even as a little kid, Mary loved George Bailey. And we see as adults that she still has a huge crush on him. And she wants him, but I guess as far as having flaws, the few that George Bailey has is that he's a bit of a naive, arrogant dork, and he can't, even though he is attracted to the character Mary, he doesn't fully realize that she loves him and that she has for many years. And it takes a while, but eventually he realizes that she's the best woman that he could have, and as the years go by, he's still stuck in the town of Bedford Falls, and he still struggles to keep the family business afloat, but he also still dreams of someday leaving, but he just never does. And I guess what really makes It's a Wonderful Life relatable is this is how life goes for some people. People dream of doing something huge, but sometimes they just don't make it. But that doesn't mean there aren't some good things in life. And at this point, the few that have never heard or seen It's a Wonderful Life, are probably wondering, how is this a Christmas movie? Well, funny enough, Christmas does not appear in It's a Wonderful Life until around the 80-minute mark, I think. And when that happens, the rest of the film takes place on Christmas Eve, I believe. And the character George Bailey and his uncle have to deliver $8,000 from the loan office to the bank because of some business reasons that I don't think the film fully explains, but I don't think we're supposed to fully understand all of it. And while doing so, George's uncle, Billy Bailey, played by Thomas Mitchell, accidentally misplaces the money, and it winds up in the hands of Mr. Potter. And when Mr. Potter finds the money, he decides to keep it, hide it, and finally drive the Bailey family out of business. And George becomes more desperate as the day goes on to find the money, because if he doesn't, there would be a lot of legal ramifications, and he could possibly go to prison, and everything that he has worked his whole life to do could be ruined. He even comes begging to Mr. Potter at one point for help, and Mr. Potter refuses because he finds the whole situation funny, and he just revels in the idea of George being ruined. And he tells him, apparently George has life insurance, and he says, "You're worth more dead than alive." And George, not knowing what else to do, seriously considers committing suicide after making a prayer to God. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but now I will. The very first scene of It's a Wonderful Life shows all the people of Bedford Falls praying for George, hoping that he will find a way, that things could get better for him. And then we go to the stars, and we see some stars glowing, and I guess this is meant to be heaven. It's the 1940s, so we'll let whatever special effects flaws slide. And as the stars glow, we see that this is apparently God and some of the angels. And the movie is primarily told through flashback, as God and his main angel, Joseph, decide to send in an angel in training named Clarence. And the idea behind the character of Clarence is that Clarence has not yet earned his wings, and helping George Bailey could possibly get him his wings. So yeah, It's a Wonderful Life is also a fantasy movie in a way, and it works pretty well. The opening scene is what really sets up the film, and when it finally comes into play with the angels, the film really works. And this is one of the movies with God and heaven and the angels that I love, and it's not a big deal, but some people will bitch and moan. I've seen people whine about this, and you don't need to be religious to love this movie. I've loved it since I was a little kid, and the message is great, and it's just a wonderful film, and one of the few films where God and angels aren't portrayed as being assholes. And the character Clarence, when he finally appears, he's kind of a... He's a real funny character, but he's also a caring character. In the opening scene, God, I think... I'm not sure exactly who the characters in the opening are, but I think it's God, and God says he's got the faith of a child and a lot of care, I guess. And I like that line, the faith of a child, because children, yeah, kind of true. Children will believe in just about anything you tell them. And Clarence, when he appears and tries to convince George that he has a reason to live, George is still... of course, if someone comes up to you and says they're an angel, people are gonna be like, this guy's crazy, and that's what George Bailey thinks. And when Clarence says that killing himself would not make anything better for anyone, George says, I wish I had never been born. And this is where the part that It's a Wonderful Life is most famous for comes. Clarence grants George's wish, and then he shows him what the world would have been like if he had never been born. How the people he's grown to know and love over the years, how they would have turned out without him. Just how the town would have turned out without him. And yeah, as you could imagine, It's a Wonderful Life. It's a very long, for its time, it's over 2 hours. It's the 1940s. It's a very long movie, and it covers a lot of ground within that time. We literally pretty much see a guy's life from when he's young to, I guess, around middle aged. And we see I guess, the highs and lows of life. And James Stewart, everybody has talked about what an amazing actor he was. And It's a Wonderful Life contains one of his greatest performances, and it was the first movie that James Stewart made. Let me explain. In the early 40s, James Stewart joined the army during World War II, and he fought in World War II, and I've read many recounts of his time in the war, and I can't remember all the specifics, but pretty much he was a fucking war hero. And It's a Wonderful Life was one of his first, if not the first movies he did when he got back home after the war ended. James Stewart, he could portray just about every emotion you could find, and with that voice of his, he could do some pretty funny stuff, but he could also be taken very seriously when he had to do the drama scenes. And as I said, his character is. He dreams, and I guess he over expects things to go a certain way. And he's a bit of a doofus at times. But he has a lot of heart, and he's very decent. And there are scenes where he gets really angry, and we see him lose it, his temper. We see him not get too violent, but like he kicks a wall or punches a wall, which is a very human reaction. And scenes where he has conversations with other characters are some of the best conversation scenes from a black and white movie I've ever seen. Like, there's an early scene where George has a conversation with his father, who's simply credited as Pa Bailey in the credits, played by Samuel S. Hinds. And this is a very great scene where we see the father and his son, kid and parent, have a real kid and parent conversation where they talk seriously about life, and the kid is very set on what he wants to do with his life, and the parent wishes them the best and supports them, but they at the same time they still feel like they could do better in another area, or they just want the best for them, and they're wondering if the choice that they're taking is the right choice. And during this scene, James Stewart goes through a lot of different emotions. One moment he's upbeat, another he's frustrated, another he's happy, and it plays like a real conversation would, where people will shift in emotions, and sometimes it'll go well, sometimes it won't, but in the end, they're family and they love each other. This is the scene that convinced me that It's a Wonderful Life was different than most old-time films that I'd seen. Because I had not seen a conversation this real before in one of these type movies. And the film carries a lot of, as I said, mixing of drama and comedy, and there are a lot of funny scenes in It's a Wonderful Life. For example, there's this scene early in the film where George, I guess, goes to a high school dance. I think it's implied that he graduated high school. And if I had any problems with It's a Wonderful Life, it'd be this. It's a great film. I love it. It is fucking amazing. But this is the one little bit thing that kind of bugs me. James Stewart plays the character over possibly 2 decades, and when it starts out, he's either in his late teens or early 20s. Okay. James Stewart may have looked good for his age back then. Like, I could see him playing a guy in his late 20s, but a guy in his late teens, early 20s, I know movies have used older actors to play teenagers, but damn. God damn. There is no way he is that young in that part of the film at the beginning. But anyway, he goes to this high school dance and he meets his old friend and the girl who has had a huge crush on him, Mary, and he sort of takes her away from the annoying boy who she went to the dance with, and they partake in this dance contest. And this is a pretty cool scene because James Stewart, he was a great dancer. He and Donna Reed, and maybe in the 1940s, may have the 1940s type dance music, but it's a fun, cool, and really gets you moving with that scene. He could really get his legs to go all over the place. And one of the kid who originally went to the dance with Mary, he's jealous, and one of his, I guess, douchey friends comes to him, and for some reason the dance floor is built over a pool, so that the school can have two things in one. And as a prank, they activate the pool to open up, and as the floor splits open and starts to slide, everyone stops dancing, but the music keeps going, and the only people who are still dancing, who are oblivious to the opening, are George and Mary. And they still dance, and they're just this far from falling into it, and this goes on for about a minute, and then finally they just collapse into the water. And then, even though they're in the water, they still keep dancing. And some kids start pushing others in, and then everybody starts jumping in. And the two dicks who turned on the pool, even though it was a real dickish thing to do, it's hard to hate them because they just shrug, go with it themselves, and they jump in the pool. And it's a fun watching it. I wanted to jump in that pool. It just looks so much fun. You just go in with all your clothes. Everyone's wearing suits because yeah, it takes place in the 20s or 30s, and the old curmudgeon judge who was overseeing the dance, he's like, "Get out of there!" And 1 second later, he's like, oh well, and he just jumps in himself. Although I can't nail down my favorite, I would say the pool dance scene is one of my favorite funny scenes in the film. I don't know exactly what else I could say about James Stewart as George Bailey, other than he's simply fantastic, and James Stewart was amazing. He was incredible, fantastic. Every glorifying word you could give to the man, I would give. Donna Reed as Mary Hatch, who later in the film would become Mary Bailey, I think. The film never really specifies, but that's what I would assume. Donna Reed, she plays a great leading female role. The character is very three-dimensional. Or it's not just that she loves him. Her job in this film, she goes through many emotions as well. The character of Mary, she's a wonderful person, but at the same time, she gets frustrated. She loses patience, or she's not sure how to feel. Once again, playing a very human character. And we see, in the opening of the film, we see George as a child, Mary as a child, and the actors playing them as kids, these are good child actors. I think just about every actor and actress in It's a Wonderful Life did a terrific job. Everybody was on their fucking A game. It was all just perfect. I couldn't think of anybody in It's a Wonderful Life who did not do a good acting job. Everybody was fucking great. The two child actors were Robert J. Anderson and Jean Gale, credited as Little George and Little Mary. And yeah, they are little. And before I get to them, I want to finish with Donna Reed. She and James Stewart have a just real gut-wrenching scene of emotions where they haven't seen each other in a while, I think, and years after they last saw each other, she still cares about him, and she tries to get him to see that she loves him, but at the same time he's going through a rough patch, at least inside. he was planning to leave once again when his brother got home, and now his brother has plans to go work in another state somewhere. So he's not sure what to do, and he's not sure he wants to settle down or find someone. And when he goes sees Mary, she's apparently... It's implied that she's been dating another man, but their relationship isn't going anywhere. Her mother thinks it is, but it really isn't. And, well, she's with George, trying to drop some hints that to him to make him see that she loves him. He's just oblivious. I don't want to say the word because everyone else has said about him. Begins with an N, and they get a phone call on one of those old-fashioned phones where you hold it and talk into a piece and then take the other thing, put it to your ear. And it's a phone call from her supposed boyfriend out of state, Sam Wainwright, played by Frank Albertson, who many people might have seen as the character Ted Cassidy, the obnoxious, rich cowboy Texan from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. But yeah, they get a phone call from him, and he's talking about going into a major business, and he said it's like a glass manufacturing business. And as this scene's going on, Mary and George are literally this close to each other, face to face, as they listen and talk into the phone, and they're just looking at each other and listening to Sam talk. And we see that Sam on the other line is with some other woman, so yeah, that relationship was going nowhere. But Mary and George, as they're staring at each other, you can tell her heart is sort of breaking because she feels like he's never gonna love her. And George, you can tell he's finally starting to see that she is the best person that he could be with. And they both get really teary-eyed, and if it was any possible for James Stewart's voice to break any further, it does here. Because as they talk, he first says that he doesn't want to be with anyone because the stress of his life has gotten to him, and then they hold each other and they just kiss. And I read that this kiss scene, James Stewart and Donna Reed apparently really got into it because it was really I guess the emotions of the scene just overwhelmed them. And I read that this kiss scene actually caused some trouble for the MPAA, or the ratings board at the time. So, way to go. But it's just a great dramatic scene. It's real intense. The fact that, I know I keep saying it, but the fact that it came from a film from 1946 just makes this film stand out to me. Donna Reed, James Stewart were just fantastic in this. I'm saying fantastic a lot. I don't care. It's a wonderful life. This is one of the greatest Christmas movies ever made. I love it, and I will love it for many years to come, I think. If anyone's seen my other reviews, I keep mentioning some friends I used to have. Well, one of those friends liked to write, and he loved It's a Wonderful Life, I think more than me. And whenever he wrote a female character, he'd name her Mary, because he just thought it was a wonderful name, and he loved the character in this, and I think he loved Donna Reed. For all the more modern films and grittier films I've reviewed, the people who watch me anyway will probably be surprised that I love such classic films. But I do. I love all types of movies. Mostly. And It's a Wonderful Life is it's one of the first films I ever loved. It's one of the earliest films I remember loving, and I may have already said that, but it just means a lot to me. It's so special. Before I go to the other cast members of It's a Wonderful Life, I have to mention these facts. Despite being one of the most beloved movies ever made, and being an all-time classic, and many modern filmmakers and film lovers adore this movie, It's a Wonderful Life was not a box office hit when it first came out. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people know this, but I have more to mention. And if I had to guess, I would say it's because even today it's still played every Christmas on various channels. And just like A Christmas Story, another movie that wasn't a huge success, I think, when it came out. Yeah, and people just came to see it as a movie to watch every year around the holidays. And I think this fact is something that may surprise people, unlike the earlier one. It's a Wonderful Life did not have a copyright claim when it first came out. And according to the information I've read, the movie did not receive a copyright claim until the 1990s. So yeah, for many decades, It's a Wonderful Life was a public domain movie. And when I rewatched this a few years ago and last week to mentally get myself reacquainted with it, at the very end, before the credits roll, we see a black and white shot of a bell ringing, giant bell, and over it we see a copyright claim, and next to it is the year 1993. I probably never noticed it when I was a little kid, but show that to someone nowadays, and they'll probably be like, what the fuck? And next to not being a hit when it came out and not having a copyright claim, the movie was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, James Stewart, Best Director, Frank Capra, Best Sound, and Best Editing. Didn't win any of them. Go figure. Well, at least Frank Capra and James Stewart got their Oscars for other movies. Many people have said that they think one of the reasons It's a Wonderful Life didn't do as well as it probably should have was it was so soon after World War II, and people, I guess, this is what my grandfather has said, people weren't expecting this type of movie. I'm glad people came to see it as the classic it's become. I'm planning to put this video in black and white as I do with every black and white film I review. So I'm not sure anyone can tell, but I've been feeling a little sick. Took a lot of medicine and got almost 10 hours of sleep last night, so I think I'm doing better. But I was not sure I could do this video, but I think I'm doing alright, and I'll continue. And I don't know if anyone can see, but been growing it in. Oh, and another funny scene in the movie is that scene I mentioned where Mary and George meet up. And this is before the emotional telephone scene. It's when George comes in and Mary's mother is not happy he's there because she thinks Mary is gonna be with Sam Wainwright. And when her mother calls out, "What are you two doing?" And Mary, just I guess a little pissed that George is barely acknowledging her, calls out, "He's making violent love to me, mother." And for the 1940s, I'm just curious how long it took them to convince the ratings board to let them keep that in back then. And I'm pretty sure I talked a lot already about Lionel Barrymore as Mr. Potter, but if I have anything else to say, it's he's a great actor, and the character does not have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. Here's something that's interesting about the Mr. Potter character. When he finds the $8,000 that George's uncle has misplaced, and he decides to keep it to, I guess, have the money and mainly to drive them out of business. When the film ends, Mr. Potter, it's implied, is never caught for what he did. And some people have wondered why the character was never truly punished for what he did. And it's like that one story element in a movie that it's almost feels it's like in another movie people feel like they forgot to address that. But here I know that's not how they did it, because for those who have seen It's a Wonderful Life, at the end, George, after being shown what the world would have been like if he had never been born, comes back and running through the town, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, and he calls out Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter. Potter says, "And a Happy New Year to you too, in jail." And then at the end, everybody comes to George's rescue and donates to save the business and him. So I guess in a way you could say Potter lost. No matter how hard he tried, he could never stop the Baileys, he could never stop George, and he will never have full control over the town. And people who go by the film's religious side will say he'll probably get his in the afterlife. And a funny comment I read on an IMDb forum for It's a Wonderful Life was someone said, "Not even the devil would take him." The character may not be the most awful as some movie villains, and except for stealing the 8,000, everything he does throughout the film is just a cold-hearted business tactic. He never does anything else that's truly horrible. But yeah, he is pretty fucking awful. And Lionel Barrymore, despite the character, as my mom pointed out, not being the most three-dimensional, Lionel Barrymore is still able to give a fantastic performance and bring a lot. And I read that originally Clarence was supposed to appear to Mr. Potter right after George did, and Clarence was gonna reprimand or shame him for what he had done. And I'm not sure if that scene would have worked. It would have been nice to see Potter directly get some kind of comeuppance for what he did. But many people feel it wouldn't have fit the tone of the final part of the movie. And I agree, it would have really offset the way the final 10 minutes of the film go. But at the same time, never know. Maybe it could have worked. It's getting hot.